so we're diving deep again, and this time it's all thanks to you guys over at Ashley County now.
Yeah, our ACN listeners always have the best stuff for us to explore.
They really do. And today we're looking into someone who looms large in Ashley County history, John C. Riley.
A pivotal figure indeed, especially when we talk about the history of law enforcement here in Ashley County.
Absolutely. And the source material you guys provided is amazing, this biographical account of John C. Riley.
It's more than just a biography, wouldn't you say? I mean, it really paints a picture of what life was like back then. The social dynamics, the legal landscape, it's all there.
It really is. And that's what we're here for, right? To uncover those fascinating details about Ashley County's past.
Precisely. And through the lens of John C. Riley's life and times, we get a front row seat to a truly transformative period in our county's history.
Okay, so let's start with the beginning. The account tells us that Riley's first public position was as deputy sheriff under Floyd Walker.
That's right. And it makes you wonder, doesn't it? How much did family connections play a role back then? The source hints that Riley's uncle, County Judge Joe H. Riley, might have had a hand in that appointment.
It's always interesting to see those threads of influence, how they weave through history. And speaking of Sheriff Walker, he was the one who oversaw Ashley County's only legal hanging, right?
That's correct. A rather stark contrast to some of the events that would occur later during Riley's time as sheriff, as we'll see. Events that were officially recorded as unsolved.
Right, the lynchings. A very difficult topic, of course, but one that's undeniably part of Ashley County's history and something we need to address.
Absolutely. It's important to acknowledge the complexities and the dark chapters of our past, and to see how those events, those failures of justice, stand in such stark contrast to how things would be handled today. Federal intervention would be almost certain in cases like those.
It really highlights the shifts in accountability and the role of higher authorities over time. And you can't talk about this era without acknowledging the racial climate. The account even mentions a pamphlet by J. Edgar Hoover that speaks to the prevailing attitudes of the time.
A chilling reminder of the deep-seated prejudices that existed and how they undoubtedly influenced the course of justice, or the lack thereof, in Ashley County.
It really makes you ponder the question, who was justice really serving back then?
A question for the ages, isn't it? And one that resonates even today as we strive for a more just and equitable society.
So Riley starts as a deputy under Walker, then serves in the same role under Sheriff Hogan Oliver from 1913 to 1916.
Right, and this is where things get interesting. Sheriff Oliver was often out of the county campaigning for state auditor, which meant
Deputy Riley had to step up and shoulder a lot of responsibility.
Precisely. It gave him invaluable experience and probably boosted his profile in Ashley County. And we see evidence of that just before the Democratic primary in 1916.
Oh, you mean that notice in the local paper, the Eagle, I think it was.
That's the one. Deputy Sheriff John Riley announces a raid on a gambling operation in Morrell, which we now know as Boydell, broke up the game, made some arrests. Seems like a well-timed bit of publicity, doesn't it?
Hard to argue with that. But the primary itself threw a curveball. Dr. Chavis won the nomination for sheriff.
And John Riley, as the runner-up, was in a position to potentially benefit if there were any irregularities with that win. But then, his career takes an unexpected turn.
He withdraws from the race for circuit clerk to become cashier at the Fountain Hill Bank. And the circumstances surrounding that move are, well, intriguing.
The previous cashier had to step down due to health issues. But get this, the cashier before him, Dr. M.L. Smith, left the bank and the state altogether after being indicted in connection with the Thurman killing.
So it was almost like a domino effect, creating this opening that Riley stepped into. And, being a bank cashier back then, especially in a smaller community like Fountain Hill, was a much bigger deal than it might seem.
Oh, absolutely. They were central figures in those communities. Part teller, part loan officer, part community leader. It would have given Riley significant connections and insights into the financial workings of Ashley County.
And he didn't just sit behind a desk either. He was elected to the school board, served as its secretary.
Public service was clearly a driving force for him. And finally, in 1924, he achieves his goal, elected sheriff of Ashley County. And it's a time of great change, nationally and locally.
Prohibition was in full swing. The Volstead Act was the law of the land. But enforcing it in Ashley County, that was a whole other story.
Especially in the Delta region, with its large plantations and moonshine operations.
It was a clash of cultures, really. You had these powerful landowners who often turned a blind eye to, or even participated in, the illegal liquor trade, and they resisted any outside interference, especially from law enforcement.
And the tragic killing of Deputy Sheriff Sam Williams in 1927 really highlights this tension. shot and killed by a planter while searching for illegal liquor.
And the account mentions there is already an old quarrel between them, adding another layer of complexity to this tragic event.
In the subsequent hearing, conflicting eyewitness accounts. Some claimed the planter essentially lured Williams there to kill him. Others said he only fired in self-defense.
It really underscores how subjective memory can be, how personal biases can shape our understanding of even recent historical events.
It makes you wonder how many other stories from Ashley County's past are shrouded in similar uncertainty.
Now, we have to talk about the lynchings. It's a difficult and sensitive subject, but an essential part of this story. Two unsolved lynchings during Riley's time as sheriff.
The first, in Wilmot in 1927. A young black man arrested for attempted assault. Sheriff Riley decided to have dinner before transporting the prisoner to Hamburg, left his car with the prisoner handcuffed inside, unlocked, on a side street.
And a mob took the prisoner from the car and he was later found hanged. No arrests were ever made. What's even more unsettling is the conflicting information reported by the local newspapers at the time, the Gazette and the Eagle.
They differed on crucial details: the number of people involved, the location, who sounded the alarm, how the prisoner was taken, even the night it happened. It raises serious doubts about the thoroughness of the investigation, or even if there was a deliberate effort to obscure the truth.
It leaves us with this unsettling feeling of how easily narratives around such horrific events can be manipulated or simply lost to time. The second lynching, in Crossett in 1932, a mill worker, Frank Tucker, reportedly slashed the throat of a local officer, Henry Reed.
And a mob, estimated at about 1,000 men, took Tucker from the city jail and lynched him. Sheriff Riley arrived 45 minutes later, took the body down, offered a reward, but couldn't identify anyone involved. The coroner's inquest, hanging by unknown parties.
It's a chilling reminder of the dark side of mob justice and the lack of accountability that often accompanied it.
Especially when you compare it to other crimes during Riley's time. The document mentions misdemeanor murders in Ashley County.
These were homicides where the victim was seen as somehow deserving of their fate, leading to more lenient treatment by the justice system. A very flawed and subjective application of the law.
But then you have a case like the 1932 bank robbery and kidnapping in the Bank of Portland.
Which was solved quickly thanks to cooperation between law enforcement agencies.
And Sheriff Riley personally traveled to other states to bring back the suspects. The account even mentions how sheriffs were reimbursed for using their own vehicles on official business. A stark contrast to the inaction surrounding the lynchings.
It speaks volumes about the selective nature of justice and the differing priorities of law enforcement at the time. Now, what about the political landscape of Ashley County during this era?
The Great Depression had a profound impact on local politics. Powerful factions controlled who could even run for office.
You had the large plantation owners in the Delta, the merchants in the West controlling votes through economic dependence.
And they initially held sway over Riley as well. But as he served multiple terms as sheriff, his popularity grew. People were even naming their children after him.
And that made him less reliant on those power brokers. They tried to undermine him, but when that failed, they orchestrated his appointment as United States Marshal for Western Arkansas in 1936.
A clever move, really. They got him out of local politics and neutralized any potential threat he posed.
He served 4 years, then came back to Ashley County and ran for sheriff again in 1940.
But he lost, finishing last. A bitter disappointment, according to the account.
And sadly, his story takes a tragic turn after that. The bad blood that developed between him and Ira Johnson, a peace officer in Monticello,
led to that fateful confrontation on February 9, 1941. Johnson claimed Riley had been drinking and was about to drive away. He tried to stop him, and according to his account, Riley fired a rifle at him. Johnson then shot and killed Riley in self-defense.
But witness accounts differed on whether Riley actually fired his rifle. Riley's son, John Clark Riley Jr., was there and fired 2 shots at Johnson, injuring him slightly. Both were arrested.
But a grand jury declined to indict either of them. A judge ordered their release, and the Drew County Sheriff stated that Johnson appeared to have acted in the line of duty. A tragic and somewhat ambiguous end to John C. Riley's life.
But the story doesn't end there. John Clark Riley Jr., he enlisted in the Air Corps just 2 months after his father's death.
Served as a mechanic, crew chief, pilot, stationed in England and Libya during World War II.
And in 1943, during the Ploiești oil field raid in Romania, his bomber crashed. He and 6 other crew members were killed.
Only 24 years old. Posthumously awarded the Purple Heart and the President's Commendation, a reminder of the human cost of these historical events.
The account ends with an anecdote. A former sheriff from Drew County runs into a black woman who asks if he's still the sheriff. When he says no, she replies, "Do you mean to tell me you ain't nothing no mo?"
A simple question, but it speaks volumes about power and status. And the author connects it to John Riley, suggesting that at the time of his death, he too was, in a sense, nothing no mo.
And the author leaves us with a question. If Ira Johnson acted in the line of duty, why wasn't young Riley indicted? Did the grand jury's inaction in both cases reflect a broader sentiment that both Riley and Johnson were no longer figures of authority, nothing no mo in the eyes of the community?
It's a thought-provoking question that lingers long after you finish reading the account. It makes you reconsider the dynamics of power, justice, and social standing in Ashley County during that time.
Well, ACN listeners, we hope this deep dive into John C. Riley's life has given you a new perspective on Ashley County's past. His story is a window into a complex era full of contradictions and challenges.
From prohibition and its impact on the Delta to the horrors of racial violence and the intricate workings of local politics, Riley's journey reflects the larger shifts and struggles that shaped Ashley County.
And as you continue to explore our county's rich history, we encourage you to think about the lasting impact of these events and figures. How does understanding the past inform our present?
What new questions does this deep dive raise for you? What other stories from Ashley County's past are waiting to be uncovered? It's a history worth exploring, debating, and remembering.
Absolutely. And we at the Deep Dive are always eager to join you on that journey of discovery.